Home prices are plummeting everywhere. Burnaby, Coquitlam, Port Moody, Maple Ridge, New West, Pitt Meadows, basically across the board, home prices have dropped. Now, if you're a homeowner or you hope to be one day, these are the two things that you should care about most. How much is my home worth today compared to what it was yesterday, and how long would it take to sell in today's market? I'm Angelo with the Atlas Group. We are in July now, meaning we are looking at stats from June, because it is time for another 1-minute market update that always ends up being slightly longer than 1 minute. So this month, the Greater Vancouver Realtors, our real estate board, has more or less called the bottom, it looks like. They're stating that sales this past month have decreased less than they have in previous months. So meaning the decrease in sales that we've been seeing for the rest of the year is slowing down, meaning that relatively more sales are starting to happen, basically. Now, why does that mean that we're at the bottom or at least close to it? Well, it means that buyers are just getting a little bit more confident in making purchases. The tariff stuff is sort of slowly starting to go away, though it seems like every week there's something new. The election, of course, is more settled now. The government is getting into the swing of things and they're starting to at least slowly take some action. So just generally speaking, there's a little bit less uncertainty for buyers and people are feeling a little bit more confident in where things are going and, their own personal job situations. And this is corroborated by the conversations that we're having with our own buyers. People are just generally feeling a little bit more confident. Though, certainly people aren't coming out in droves to buy houses right now. That said, just this past week alone, we were in multiple offers on 2 different properties. So, good properties are still selling and are still getting a fair bit of attention. Anyway, enough talking. Let's jump into the stats. That's what you're here for anyway. So starting off with detached homes in Burnaby, you are down 0.7% from last month and down 3.4% from this time last year. New West, you're down 0.8% from last month and down 5.1% from this time last year. That's a big drop. Coquitlam, you're down 1.6% from last month and down 5% from last year. Port Moody, you are up 2% from last month, but down 3.1% from last year. Port Coquitlam, you are down 2.1% from last month and down 2.9% from last year. Maple Ridge, you are down 0.4% from last month and down 1.5% from last year. Pitt Meadows, you're down 2.5% from last month and down 1.9% from this time last year. So not a great time for detached homes. They are certainly taking the brunt of the increased inventory that we're seeing more or less across the market. As always, if information like this is helpful for you, make sure you hit the subscribe button, and better yet, share this with someone who might also find this useful. Okay, on to townhomes now. Burnaby, you are up 0.4% from last month, but down 2.6% from this time last year. New West, you're down 3.1% from last month and down 4.9% from last year. Coquitlam, actually a winner this time. You're up 1.1% from last month and up 1.1% from last year. Port Moody, you're down 0.1% from last month and down 0.9% from last year. Port Coquitlam, you're down 0.7% from last month and down only 0.1% from last year. Not so bad. Maple Ridge, you are down 1.4% from last month and down 2.4% from this time last year. And Pitt Meadows, you're up 1.9% from last month and 0.6% from last year. So you might be asking yourself, why are we actually seeing these price drops? Because earlier this year we had high inventory and prices were staying relatively stagnant. Well, that's a good question. And really what this comes down to is mostly psychology. Sellers have been waiting on the sidelines for a long time and they might have actually had their home listed for quite some time. And a lot of them are just getting tired of waiting. They're wanting to make their next move. Maybe they're upsizing, maybe they're downsizing, maybe they're moving to a different city, different province. At some point, you just kind of have to make a deal work. And unfortunately, as a seller right now, oftentimes that means taking a little bit less than what you wanted. But most of the time, if you're buying, at least in a similar sort of area at a similar sort of time, you're actually winning on the purchase because you're buying at a lower price as well. So not that it necessarily evens out, but that's kind of why you're seeing prices start to drop a little. Anyway, let's jump into condos now. Starting off once again in Burnaby, you are down 1% from last month and down 4.4% from this time last year. New West, you're down 0.9% from last month and down 2.1% from last year. Coquitlam, you're down 1.8% from last month and down 4.8% from last year. So again, Coquitlam getting hit real hard for some reason. Port Moody, you are down 0.7% from last month and down 2.5% from last year. Port Coquitlam, you're up 0.3% from last month and down 1.3% from last year. Maple Ridge, you're down 2% from last month and down 3.8% from last year. Pitt Meadows, you're down 2.4% from last month and down 3.4% from last year. All right, and lastly, jumping into days on market, or how long a house is taking to sell on average. Burnaby, you are up to 23 days. New West, you're up to 17. Coquitlam, you're up to 20 days. Port Moody, you're up to 21 days. Port Coquitlam, you're actually down to 12 days. Maple Ridge, you're up to 22 days, and Pitt Meadows, you are down to 18 days on market. So is it a good time to sell a house right now? Well, honestly, no, not really, but it's a really good time to buy. And, you know, depending on your situation, it might actually make sense to pull that trigger to at least start working towards making that move. So if you're thinking about it and you want to get a little bit of advice on your particular situation, or you want to know a little bit more about what's happening in your particular neighborhood, there is a link in the description below. You can click on it, you can book a time to chat with us, and we'll give you some good advice. We're not here to try and convince you to sell your house when you don't want to. We're just here to give you good advice and help you out to make that move when the time makes sense for you. I'm Angelo with the Atlas Group. I'll see you in the next one.